In April, I wanted to make a presentation on autism. We know the central nerve system has a very complex system, and it causes longitudinal results on brain. And autism, OCD, and ADHD is a result of this damage. There are many phases for the development of brain. The system developed in these parts are very sensitive for internal and external modifications, from physiology to morphology to behavior. We are having a lot of problems. My presentation aims at the following: neurodevelopmental diseases, and especially autism, and its relation with environmental or circular exposure and its effect on the neurodevelopment, to look at the drug use or medication use during pregnancy, and to find the increased sensitivity in these developmental phases. When we look at the relationship between the environmental effects and neurodevelopmental diseases, we have to look possible mechanisms. One is mitochondrial dysfunction and increased oxidative stress. Other one is immune dysregulation. Another one, especially changes in neurotransmitter systems, increased serotonin in autism, and increased neuronal stimulation, and the impair of balance, the balance between exhibition and inhibition. And the last mechanism is dysregulation of thyroid hormones. Oxidative stress, as we know, is stemming from the imbalance between ROS production and oxidant defense activity. We have a small level of ROS for cell control, but if we have it too much, it causes stress. The oxidative stress and neurogenetical disease relationship is discussed a lot, especially in autism, OCD, and ADHD. It's shown that there is a relation. The mitochondria is very effective here. Mitochondrial dysfunction causes extreme ROS production and the impair of oxidative balance. In autism, mitochondrial dysfunction has a higher prevalence, and many autistic has mitochondrial DNA abnormalities, so the relation in between is significant apparently. How oxidative stress affect neuronal development? First, it is impairing the DNA repair. It creates mutation in nucleus and mitochondrial DNA, cell death, or the triggering of mitochondria. The second important mechanism is the dysregulations in immune system. In prenatal area, the viral and bacterial infections are correlated to the increased level of autism and schizophrenia. Many genes in immune or inflammatory response is correlated to autism. Also, the autism patients, both in blood and in brain tissues, there is changing cytokine levels, which had been determined in 2013. How the irregularities in the immune system is affecting central system. The increased cytokines, neuronal proliferation, differentiation, immigration and stonogenesis, migration and stonogenesis, especially cytokine IL-6, IL-TB, and TNF-alpha, can cause some brain morphologies which are in compliance with the pathology of these diseases. Another important effect mechanism is maternal interleukin increase as a result of Shakira's activation. Acute phase genes are activated, and this is a result of this process. And one of the important issues is the oxidative stress encouraging this and contributing to autism and stress. Also, dysregulation in the immune system are also affecting the neurotransmitter system, especially serotonin activity is important in autism. The upregulation in SERT activity and leading to higher serotonin levels in blood and decreased serotonin level in brain. These are results of immune system dysregulation. The third mechanism is altered neurotransmitter systems. As we know, during the development, central neural system morphogenesis and neuronal age in migration and differentiation neurotransmitters have an effect. The toxic materials interfering with neurotransmitter system can cause acute and long-term results. and has a role on the pathogenesis of neurotransmittal diseases, the most important of which is serotonin in autism. We have a 30%, around 30% of high blood serotonin level. The height of blood serotonin can cause from genetical disposition, prenatal infection, and neurotransmittants. There are different hypotheses which are trying to understand this situation. One of the most important effects in neurotransmitter system is change, as I already stated, excitation, the dysregulation between excitation and inhibition, because for a normal cortex function we need a normal balance, especially in GABA and glutamate there are changes. In ACD and in schizophrenia has an effect. And finally, one of the possible mechanisms related to thyroid hormone disruptions or dysregulations. As we know, thyroid hormone is not only in our body but also it is supporting neuronal development. In a Danish population-based study, it was shown that mothers with thyroid dysregulation has a higher likelihood of autism development in their children. When we look at the thyroid factors, neurotrophin 3, 4, 5, and myelin basis proteins, and their effect on all these proteins can be thought as a relation. The remainder of this presentation is mostly based on the skin. This graphic has been published in 2016. It was taken from a compilation actually. In this graph, we see that autism spectrum disorders and environmental impacts over these disorders. The most important studies have been included here. When we look at short misoprostol, lead, pesticides, thalidomide, valproic acids, SSRIs, and many medications which are used during pregnancy, pyrotiroids, the infection of maternal infection, and are having an effect of autism spectrum through various pathways, and I will be also dwelling upon this graphic throughout my presentation. To the right you see there are three most important neurodevelopmental disease: autism, schizophrenia, and ADHD. These are the important sensitive periods, especially thalidomide, misoprostol, valproic acid, and procrastination, and early time exposure and the exposure to the viral infections, polychlorophylls based on environmental pollution and their exposure throughout pregnancy. Another hypothesis here is like this: some environmental factors are causing various neurodevelopmental diseases when exposed in different times. Also, the magnitude of the exposure is thought to be related to the neurodevelopmental disorders. When we look at polychlorinated biphenyls, as we know, they are mostly environmental things, especially factory wastes. They are mingling with earth and water, then their accumulation in food chain. Two studies in 2016 and 2013 shows that maternal saline biphenyl height had increased autism risk. Another important study in 2012, when postmortem looked, when the control and autism group had been compared, 15Q11 and Q13, the publication had increased, and there was TF95 had found to be high. When polychlorinated biphenyls had been looked, they have an effective mechanism, especially in thyroid hormones. They are having a dysregulation by decreasing thyroid hormone level. The dendrites, in particular the cells, are suppressed. In addition to this, they are affecting neurotransmitter system, sexual synaptic transmission, and neurosynapticity is impaired, and oxidative stress is increased, and it causes hyperserotonemia, and it paves the way for autism. As it might be seen, these are studies from recent 4 or 3 years. The second most important environmental exposure is lead exposure. Related to lead exposure, as the hypothesis which I already covered, especially in trimester exposure is seen related to schizophrenia, and lead and air pollution have been found to be related to autism. The lead exposure is especially prefrontal, damages prefrontal cortex, hippocampus, and cerebellum. Here there are neural differentiation and it is impairing the synapses and neurogeneration and the receptor function, and glutamate's release has an effect on this plasticity. It is changing dopamine-related systems. It's creating growth as a result of oxidative violence, and it has an effect on immune system. Another important exposure is arsenic. Arsenic is a part of industrial pollution, and also it might be stemming from contaminated well waters, so it's an important public health issue. Arsenic, glutamate, serotonin, noradrenaline, acetylcholine are the pathway of the effect and changing the expression of the subunits in these receptors. In addition to this, it's impairing HPA axis, it's increasing corticosteroid level, and it's decreasing glucocorticosteroid amount. DNA methylation and histaminification are increasing apoptosis and necrosis, and it has an effect on oxidative stress. Another important environmental factor is pesticides. Pesticide exposure, especially after conception and between 26th and 61st days, are found to be related to autism in 2017. Actually, 2 studies in 2007 and 2017. And in the sensitive phase pesticide exposure, the 38th day and 163 days after postpartum is the sensitive era. Between 346 and 529 days are shown as risky area. Also, the exposure of mother in the second trimester and in the third trimester, organophosphate and pyrethroid exposure had been found to be related to autism. And pesticides is mostly inhibiting esterase enzyme, and it's impairing oxidation, vision, balance, mitochondrial dysfunction, oxidative stress, is supporting alkaphosis. Bisphenol A, you know, it's I think very closely, especially in plastics. It's an indispensable compound in plastics used for child toys. And actually it's a very up-to-date issue because of their negative effect. BPA effect is related to the decreased thyroid hormone levels, especially in the third trimester. In mother's urine samples, there is a BPA level issue, and it has found to be related to the infant. It's inhibiting the system and causing autism. Another issue is immune system dysregulation and oxidative stress increase. Maternal use of medication is also another issue which increases the autism risk. Thalidomide, valproic acid, misoprostol, and SSRIs are studied in actual scientific sphere. Thalidomide had been used in 1950s, but after a while, because of important side effects, it was taken out of market. But in that time, especially after conception, 20th and 36th days exposure had been explained with fetal deformity and death after birth. And what's its relation with autism? Of course, we don't have a recent study on thalidomide because it's not on market, but in '94 there was a study conducted in Sweden, and in 5% of individuals affected from thalidomide had been shown to display autism symptoms, and 20th and 24th days as they had been defined as the sensitive era. Valproic acid is also a medicine used for bipolar disorders and epilepsy. Especially, it's important to prevent the epilepsy attacks in pregnancy because it has a relation with early birth risk. But VPA is known to have a relationship with autism and mental retardation. In a 2000 study, it was shown that 60% of valproic acid children had 2 or more autistic syndromes. Another neurodevelopmental disease, ADHD, was around 39%. There are important animal works related to valproic acid in the studies over rats. The embryonic day is very important when the neural tube is being closed. The valproic acid exposure in this region are shown to cause change in brain close to autism. The 12th day is important because 7th, 9th, and 15th day exposures are compared in rats, and it was seen that the autism symptoms are more shown when the VPA is used when the tube is being closed, so it gives us the idea that it might be a sensitive time for autism. This is a 2013 study in this picture. You see a rat with valproic acid exposure, and the other one is the control. When you see the tiny side apoplectoris is increasing here, according to this mark, and valproic acid has another important effect, the decreased encodering expression and having neural tube problems. To the right, you see a study of 2015. Here, valproic acid neurotoxicity, their pro-inflammatory cytokine levels and their effect on oxidative stress is being seen. On the graph above, the babies of the mothers with VPA treatment shows a very high level of interleukin toxicity. Valproic acid, comparable to thalidomide, is increasing the brain serotonin levels and blood serotonin levels. Misoprostol is an important medicine which is used for peptic ulcer, easily available medicine, since it causes these reasons. It's also there is a non-indicative use in when the ulcer is not very widespread. Unfortunately, it has a very small likelihood of stopping the pregnancy, so it causes the Merian sequence in most of the infants.
We can see it in the picture here. In the 6th and 7th cranial nerve, there are the malformations, especially misoprostol, mobile sequence cases. Autism and mental retardation levels are found to be high. And for this exposure, neural tube closing, the 4th and 6th week. Misoprostol effect mechanism. The uterus, and it starts with the ischemia, and the centralized and selective serotonin reuptake inhibitors, SSRIs, are considered safe for use during pregnancy, since there are no known reports of gross fetal dysmorphology following prenatal SSRI exposure. However, SSRIs are capable of crossing the placenta and have been shown to increase fetal serotonin levels. Serotonin acts mainly as a modulatory neurotransmitter in the mature brain. And SSRIs, in 2005, it was hypothesized that increased serotonin levels during brain development may be involved in the pathogenesis of autism, and recent systematic reviews and a meta-analysis of existing literature indicate that prenatal exposure to SSRIs increases ACD risk. And while one study suggests that the developing embryo is particularly vulnerable during the first trimester, the usually continuous and long-term intake of SSRIs makes it difficult to replicate these findings. Maternal infection. Danish population study revealed an increased ASD risk for children whose mothers had been hospitalized during pregnancy due to either viral infections in the first trimester or bacterial infections in the second trimester. And in support, several longitudinal cohort studies found associations between elevated maternal cytokine levels during pregnancy and schizophrenia and ASD in the offspring. And when you look at the figure, this relationship is different for schizophrenia and autism. The suppression of the fetal inflammation and then latent inflammation result in schizophrenia, and in ASD persistent inflammation and fetal inflammation can happen. And maternal infection. Maternal immune activation promotes the production of pro-inflammatory cytokines not only in the mother but also in the developing brain and body of the fetus, leading to permanent dysregulation of the immune system in the offspring. And in this case, even after the mother's infection, the risk for neurodevelopmental diseases continues. And this is the graphic, especially with autism and ADHD, they are correlated, and the environmental factors exposure is clear. Valproic acid, misoprostol, thalidomide, SSRIs, especially the viral infections in the first trimester and bacterial infections in the second trimester, and also environmental exposures, pesticides, chlorofloss, and the other ones are important. I hope that there will be new treatments for autism in the future. Thank you very much.